It is time to wrap this thing up. Part 3. Ow! Here we go. Which means we're very close to being completely done with a thorough review, which this is probably Sunday night for most of you, which means tomorrow's our big day. Ooh, yeah, you're going to rock and roll this thing. Hey, I want to remind you that this thing is due tomorrow. If I don't see you in the morning, no big deal. Just have it in the hallway after lunch, and you're going to drop it off into my bucket. As you walk into the testing room, I'll be collecting this packet. And make sure you've filled it out thoroughly. And don't worry. I know that you're starting to get concerned about them cheaters also. We're going to get them cheetahs. We are going to get them cheetahs. Today is the day. I got some good things that I'm going to throw at you where there's no way somebody's going to be able to get away with cheating. We're going to get them cheetahs. So we left off with Big Five, Ocean, and now we're getting to Sigmund Freud. Oh, man, I don't want to put all this stuff up here for you once to see. Let me go back. I'm going to go animate that so I can kind of pop those up one at a time. And then we're going to go over Freud for quite a while. Most of the people, as we wrap this up, are going to be pretty quick. I was looking through the list, and some of these conversations are going to be 30 seconds to a minute for some of these people. But Freud, we got to slow down. We got to talk about a lot of things that we need to be refreshed on. So that's where we'll begin in just a moment. Hey, what's going on down there?
I'm in the tent. I got you.
I got you. Hey, let me see you.
These.
Can you say, hello, everyone?
Hello, everyone.
I hope you're having a fun weekend.
I'm so having a fun weekend.
See you later, alligators.
See you later, alligators.
Let me come play with you.
Okay, you want some in the tent?
Okay, Freud. He is the creator and father of psychoanalysis, which is the first of the modern approaches to come out that is still practiced today by many psychologists in the United States. Psychoanalysis all revolves around the unconscious mind. That is the key. And I want to remind you of this. Anytime you see the word unconscious on the AP test, unless they are talking about biological unconscious and you have reason to believe that you have clear evidence in the scenario that something biologically is wrong with the person so they're getting knocked unconscious, we are talking about Sigmund Freud's psychoanalysis. Humanism, biological theory, behavioral theory, cognitive theory, they do not even agree that the unconscious mind is even real. That Freud was not scientifically accurate with his creation of the unconscious mind. So 99.9% of the time you see the word unconscious, it will always be linked to Sigmund Freud's psychoanalysis. So the unconscious is something you really need to understand well. You will see a psychoanalytic question on the AP test guaranteed. And it's probably going to revolve around knowing what this is. And it's the part of your brain where you store repressed memories, largely from childhood. And a repressed memory is something that happened to you that you cannot consciously remember. But it's in this area of the unconscious, and it affects your life today. It affects your personality, it affects your behavior, it affects your relationships more so than anything else. And that's the thing is with all of these approaches, they believe that their perspective is the greatest influencing factor on your personality. I don't think you would ever hear a psychologist say that is 100% their theory behind the reason why you are the way that you are, but that it's the greatest influencing factor. So for behaviorists, it's the environment, right? And learning from other people. From humanists, it's free will choice. From cognitive theorists, it's the way that you think and interpret the world around you. And biological theorists believe that it's your physical body that influences you more than anything else. So the unconscious mind focuses around this idea of repressed memories, largely from childhood, but Freud and the Neo-Freudians also agree that any inner conflict that we have not coped with and dealt with, or we've used a defense mechanism to diffuse from, is pushed into the unconscious. So last year, failing a class, feeling shame, embarrassment from it, that is in your unconscious mind. My grandmother passed away when I was 7 years old. I don't really remember much of that. It's in my unconscious mind. if I did not cope and deal with it in a healthy way later in life and resolve the conflicts within the unconscious. His personality theory revolves around the id, the ego, and the superego, which I know is one of your top 120 note cards, and so is unconscious, but I want to go over it. The id you are born with, which is driven by the unconscious mind. It's fully unconscious. So you are born with an unconscious mind, Freud says. So all these things that start happening to you from the very first day that you're alive start filtering into your unconscious mind. Anything that is abnormal or negative or unhealthy, and Eric Erickson, remember, said this is where we learn trust versus mistrust. The id part of your personality is called your pleasure principle. It doesn't stand for anything, but it's a good mnemonic, is kind of instinctual desires. It's all these things within you that bring you instinctual pleasure or biological fulfillment of needs. Either or, but anything that's going to give you personal pleasure. So, of course, we're talking about food and sleep and drinking, our basic biological needs, sexual needs. Of course, Freud heavily focused on the libido. The libido is your sexual energy within inside of you. And then any wish, desire that you have that is of selfish nature is going to be driven by your id and your unconscious pull to get that. And since this is the only part of your personality that you're born with, children are extremely selfish. And we see this. We see this in little kids, that they are driven totally by desire to please thyself. And some of you are much more controlled by your id today. But that's where we start as kids. Ego develops next. The ego is your personality. In reality, this is who you are becoming as an individual. And its job is to keep the id in check and appropriately learn how to balance those needs that you have from the id, because they are healthy. Eating, drinking, sleep, fulfillment of pleasure, all of these things are extremely healthy. But if driven alone through selfish motive, they can be destructive. So the ego's job is to start balancing that out. And as we continue to age, around the age of 3, 4, and 5 years old, we develop the superego, which is your moralistic principle. We learn from society what society expects from us as being right and wrong. And some of you are influenced much more during this time period than others, and your superego becomes stronger, and you really learn what is right and how we should behave and how we should act towards others. So now the ego has to keep in check both of these. So the ego, when healthy, and a sane, healthy person, will learn to balance the desires of the id with doing what is right for society. So if you're hungry, you make sure that you eat, but you do it in a polite, respectful way. You don't go steal food, which is what you would do if the id was driving you. But your superego would help you realize that taking food from a store without paying for it affects other people in our society. That hurts other people. And so our ego finds a way to appropriately get that food, maybe by asking someone, right? Or earning money to go buy your own food to be able to be healthy. The superego is running you too much. That could be unhealthy as well, because then you don't fulfill those needs. And there are a lot of people who neglect themselves, and it can drive them into psychosis if you're always consumed with pleasing other people, but you don't fulfill your own needs. Id, ego, superego. When the ego is put to shame or embarrassed, or a wish or a good thing isn't fulfilled that you desire, because of the id or the superego's pull on you, it can lead you to using the defense mechanisms. So make note of this, and you can do this on the paper too. A defense mechanism is used to protect the ego. It's used to protect the ego. That is the purpose of why we deny something, why we might use sublimation, why we might use projection or displacement. Good idea to go over all those defense mechanisms. We're not going to do that in this review, but might want to pull out that old handout that I gave you and just kind of read through those, or look at a defense mechanism quiz and kind of go through and practice those. But they are used to protect the ego, and that's a connection that you might be asked to make on the AP exam. That's the purpose of a defense mechanism. His psychosexual stage theories, he believes that these really affect us later in life as well. We can have fixations connected to these stages. So just going over them very quickly, the first stage is the oral stage. And if our id is not satisfied fully, Then you can have oral fixations. Fixation is where you had something negative happen to you in that stage and you kind of got stuck there. So today, if you have a need to always put something in your mouth, then it will go back to the first stage of your life in the oral stage. So all of these stages are all about fulfilling your libido through this manifestation. Your mouth in stage 1, your anus in stage 2. Phallic stage is where you fall in love sexually with your mother or your father. And then this is called the Oedipus or the electric complex, depending on if you're a boy or a girl. So boys are Oedipus and girls are electric complex, hating the opposite sex parent, wanting to kill them. If everything is healthy and normal in this stage, according to Freud, we come out of this a very healthy individual. But if there is some type of abuse or neglect or absence from one of the parents, it can cause a fixation in this stage. Latent state, well, go back to the fixation of anal stage 2. This is where you get anal expulsive or repulsive, or anal retentive, where you have to be perfect in every area of your life, or your life's just a mess if you have fixation there. Phallic stage, if you have fixation there, you can have very unhealthy relationships later in your life. Latent stage is the only stage where you are void of any libido-driven energy. Latent means hidden. So latent learning is hidden learning. Latent content in dreams is hidden message within the dream. Latent stage of psychosexual stage theory, what is hidden is the libido, the sexual energy. And then we are all in now the genital phase, where now we're driven by the libido fully once again and to be fulfilled in that area. So just overview those psychosexual stages. And that is where we end Sigmund Freud. We'll talk about some more Neo-Freudians. In fact, I think we're going to Carl Jung next. So that is where we are headed. Questions on Sigmund Freud? Okay, we'll go on to Carl Jung. Carl Jung, a Neo-Freudian, a reminder, because we talked about Adler earlier, people who broke away from Freud's focus on the libido and focus on the id. They focus much more on social needs than the needs of sexual desire. But they agree with the unconscious mind. They even agree with the id, the ego, and the superego, and the need to cope with repressed memories. Carl Jung is known for his collective unconscious idea, where he believed that memories are repressed from ancestors and passed down genetically into our unconscious. So remember, the Freudians believe that you're born with your unconscious mind. So just like you could be born with brown eyes genetically, you could be born with memories encoded onto your cells. Even scientifically, I mean, that makes plausible sense that your cells could have memories encoded on them. I'm not sure I want to think about that any more than what I just did, but I mean, we could kind of imagine it for a moment, I suppose. An archetype are the basis of these memories. And archetypes are symbols or images or representations of something that is passed down from generation to generation. If you have to explain an archetype on the AP FRQ, I would just use God. I think that's the easiest archetype you can use because in almost all cultures, in many religions that acknowledge one God, they will identify him mostly as a male with the same type of characteristics, very similar characteristics. Of course, then there's huge differences, between the religions. I'm not trying to get into that, but the way that we would describe the characteristics would be very similar among different cultures, even cultures that have created idols, protector, provider, lover, all these different attributes of God. Carl Jung believed that archetype, that representation of God, was passed down genetically in our collective unconscious mind. So they all connect together in that way with Carl Jung. Ooh, let's get them cheetahs. We're going to get them cheetahs. We're going to get them cheetahs. All right, I want you to take your first and your last name right now. Okay, just think of your first and your last name. If you forgot it, why would you forget? I don't know. Okay, so you got your first and your last name. Any letter in your first and your last name that is in Carl Jung's name, I want you to put a line underneath that letter. Oh, man, we're going to get them cheetahs. We're going to get them cheetahs. Woo! So if you have a C in your name, because your name's Kara, then you would underline the C. But it's first and last name. If you had a total of 2 C's, 2 lines underneath the C's. If you had 4 A's, 4 lines underneath the A in Carl. Got it? So like I'm Ryan Solano, I have two A's, two lines would go under A. Now you might not have any, but this is where we could get the cheetah, right? This is where we're going to get that cheetah. Oh yeah. I think it's time to sing. You think it's time to sing? All right. I want you to sing with me on three. We're going to get them cheetahs. 1, 2, 3. We're going to get them cheetahs. We're going to get them cheetahs. Oh yeah. Woo! Sorry, Ish. I think that was a little off tune. Maybe you could help me out on Monday. All right. Let's go on to our next person. Ooh, we're going to humanism. All right. Humanism, remember, focuses on free will, making choice, that's the greatest influence on our behavior, self-esteem, self-worth, and reaching full potential. Just a basic overview. They believe that every person, despite your past, despite your circumstances, despite your experiences, that would be behaviorism, despite your childhood, now we're talking about Freud, despite all that stuff, you can still reach your full potential in life. And that full potential is called self-actualization. And we all have a desire to become self-actualized according to the humanist. And that drive is within us, but we just need to be coached and helped to get there. And we have to fulfill needs to get there. And that's why his hierarchical system is called the hierarchy of needs, because we have 4 needs that must be met before we can become self-actualized and reach our full potential. Level 1, this is on the bottom here, so here's level 1, is the physiological needs that must be met. So we have to provide for our food, our water, our sleep. Those have to be met before we could ever have healthy relationships with other people, which is stage 3, which is the belonging and social love and connection to people, which is a huge need that we have as human beings. And listen, again, you'll have relationships if your lower levels aren't met, but they won't be healthy. So once those physiological needs are met, which in our culture, for most of us, those are met. Some of you might struggle with those more than others, but for the most part, those needs are being met for you. Safety and security is the second level, where we have an environment that we can feel safe in, that we don't feel threatened in, that we can provide for people who are dependent on us to provide for them. So this is more adult that we might be talking about, where you have children or a spouse that you have to provide for and take care of. And then when those needs are met, then you can have healthy relationships with people. And they can be as they should be. That's love and belonging is stage 3. And these are identified as level 1, level 2, level 3. Level 4 needs is self-esteem, feeling a self-worth, feeling good about who you are as an individual as a whole. And that cannot happen until you have all the 3 needs met below that. And then you can become self-actualized and reach your full potential. Self-actualization is one of your top 120 cards. There's a good chance you're going to see it tomorrow, maybe even an FRQ. We haven't seen it in a while. Connected to humanism and connected to full potential. All right? And let's go to Carl Rogers. Carl Rogers is actually the father of humanism. He's the one who created it. And his personality, remember Freud has the id, the ego, and the superego. Well, the humanists have their real self and ideal self. The real self in each of the areas of your life is who you actually are, with your talents and your abilities and your skills. The ideal self is who you think you are. And the goal in client-centered therapy is to get these to align so that you see yourself as who you actually really are, and that's when your esteem can be bolstered. And we call this congruency, when the real self and the ideal self align. We call it congruency. So if in reality you're a bad athlete, but ideally and you think you're a good athlete, we call that incongruency. They're not aligning. And your self-esteem is going to be depleted as a result, because you're never going to get affirmation or confirmation of your actual ability. And humanists will help you find the things that you're good at. They want to build you up. And this is the goal of client-centered therapy, is to lift you up, to help you feel good about yourself, to find the areas of your life that you can focus on, that you do have talents and skills in. And part of their therapy is called the unconditional positive regard, and that's their motive in therapy, is that no matter what, they're going to be positive, uplifting, regardless of anything that might be going on in your life that might be negative. I mean, they'll talk about those things with you, but they're going to put a very positive spin and try to lift you up and build you up throughout that process. Remember that they refer to their the people who go and see them for help as clients. Where Dr. Freud is going to call you a patient because he believes that you're sick and need help. So their connotation of how they even view you when going into therapy is very, very different. And just on a side note, remember that psychoanalytics and humanists will not prescribe you medication unless they are eclectic and come from the biological approach as well, which is rare with these two branches of psychology, with a psychoanalytic especially. But it's very possible. I'm not saying that you wouldn't, but it's very possible. And eclectic approaches are not that uncommon. And even if I were to become a doctor today, I won't. But if I were to become a doctor, I've told you that I come from the cognitive approach. I would probably practice from more of an eclectic behavioral cognitive approach, and in some cases maybe even desire to prescribe people medication to help them get through a process of a period of time. So that's not uncommon that many doctors are like that, and you can pick up on it quick when you're talking to someone. All right, and that wraps up our humanisms and our psychoanalytics. Big sister antagonizing little sister.
Stop doing that.
And Dad just getting a kick out of all of it. Okay, that might be too much. Hey, chill out. Hey, come here. Come here. Do you have anything to say to my students?
No.
They got a big test on Monday. Have you taken tests in kindergarten?
Yeah, there was 1 hour.
1 hour test?
Uh-huh.
Their test is 2 hours long. Can you tell them good luck?
Ours was in December.
Okay, hey, wait.
Yes,
Hey, focus. Do you have anything to say to them for encouragement?
Bye-bye.
That's it? You don't want to say good luck?
Good dude.
Do you think they're going to do well?
No.
Why don't you think they're going to do well?
No.
You don't know?
No.
You're just being silly? You ate too many donuts this morning. I think you're on a sugar high.
No.
Okay, go back and beat the tent.
No. Oh.
That's what you get. I forgot that he was later in the presentation, so you can write. Yeah, go ahead and write that hereditary genius, and then just born innate. But I don't feel like we need to go over him anymore. So, told you, hey, there'll be a few people that we spend relatively little time on, right? So let's go ahead and move on from that. If you got to pause it for a second to get that down, but let's go to Alfred Binet. Binet is where intelligence testing starts. Right, Galton tried to create an intelligence test, but kind of blew it and didn't create a valid one. And we'll talk about validity and reliability and the difference between those in just a minute. But Binet was the first. He was, remember, the Frenchman who the government hired to create a test to identify children who were mentally behind where they should be, and then to identify those kids, pull them out, and then give them a specialized education. And that's exactly what was done, and he created a very valid test. So validity, if we say that something is valid, it measures what it says it's going to measure. So if I create this test like Binet and say, hey, this is going to measure kids' mental age and their intelligence level, and then it accurately does that, we say it's a valid test. Like a driving test, if it accurately assesses whether or not you're a good driver, then it's a valid test. If it does not, then it's invalid. Reliability is just consistency between... Look at reliability like this. If I'm a reliable person, you can count on me that I will always be there when you need me. Reliability in the test is the same. The test results are always going to be the same if the test is the similar test. So if an IQ test is taken at 5, 12, 30, and 50, if it's a reliable test, you'll always get the same score. You can count on your performance being the same. Validity in an IQ test would be it accurately assessing your intelligence. So if you get an IQ of 100, you actually have an IQ of 100. So mental age is your brain age. Chronological age is the number of years you've been alive. And the name of the test was called the Binet-Simon scale. He had a partner that he worked with, but he's kind of the name that's put on that. So you see the Binet-Simon scale, we're talking about intelligence. And that's where they're going to try to get you on these AP exams. Is you'll see one or two questions that will say, this test was used for what? And you might see the Binet-Simon scale and you just connect it to intelligence. So that's why I'm saying, like, going over this review today could just remind you of that. And then tomorrow when you see it, you'll know it. So That's Binet. And then we get to Lewis Terman, who creates IQ, which stands for Intelligence Quotient. And the Stanford Binet test used the intelligence quotient to create a new test. Remember, in this test that was created at the University of Stanford was very difficult to grade. It was verbal. It took a long time. Only one person could take it at a time because it was verbal or mostly verbal test. But it was scored with this calculation, this formula that you see in front of you. Mental age over chronological age times 100. And this is how they got your IQ score back then. And you need to memorize this formula. I told you you could see this on tomorrow's test, Monday's, whenever you're listening to this thing, on your AP test. So if your mental age, which for most of you, if you're average, it's going to be the same as your chronological age, right? So I'm 36 chronologically. My mental age is 36. Then that's going to be 1 times 100. My IQ is 100. That's average. So 68% of the population is going to be average, and you're going to be right there because your mental age is the same as your chronological age, or very, very close to it. Now, I have a mental age of, remember my IQ is 117, so my mental age is slightly above my chronological age, but this gap closes as you get older and older and older. Anyways, in the adult IQ test. David Weschler is the one who creates different versions of the test that are reliable, an American, so one for children and one for preschoolers and one for adults, and you get the same score. And these are the tests. This is a version of the test that they give kids today in McKinney ISD to see if they're gifted and talented, to see if they should go into that program, which would be the top 2%. McKinney does 3%, 2 to 3% of the population in McKinney would go into that gifted and intelligent program. His scoring system that he brought out was not the formula that used to be used, the MA over CA times 100. He brought in a new scoring system called normal distribution. I'm not going to go over the normal distribution curve in this presentation, but I strongly recommend that you do, and that you know it well before tomorrow's test. You'll see one question on normal distribution, more than likely. And it could be on standard deviation, it could be on IQ scores. That's why I gave you a mini quiz on it, which I haven't graded yet. I just want, really, the purpose of that mini quiz was to make sure that you prepared yourself and studied and knew it well. It will go in the grade book eventually. Sometime this week I'll get that stuff done. But that's normal distribution, and it's done by standardization. You are compared to a population that has taken the test before you. And if you score average in the middle 68% of people, your score is going to fall between 85 and 115, which is the majority of everyone. 68% of the population falls between 85 and 115. That's almost all. That's all of us, right? That's almost all of us. And then some of us might be below that and some of us might be above that. But I don't want to go into normal distribution right now and skewed distribution. So go over that, know it. You are, it's in your top 120, so there's no need for us to go over that right now. Raymond Cattell is a heavily tested theorist on the AP exam also, and he did come up with the 16 PF test, and that was 16 personality factors using factor analysis to cluster all the traits down into 16, right? And then he broke down an intelligence into two different areas, and specifically G intelligence, which we'll talk about in just a second. We'll come back to that. These are kind of a little out of order, historically speaking, from theorists. But Raymond Cattell believed that we have fluid and crystallized intelligence. Fluid intelligence allows you to solve problems. So this is very flexible. Like water moves, you have to adjust and change to be able to solve new problems. And as you age, especially as you get into your elderly years, this starts to decrease your ability to be able to be sharp and solve problems efficiently. Crystallized intelligence are your factual knowledge, your semantic memories that you are gaining as you progress through your life. So this always increases as you age. You learn more and more facts. You've learned more facts this week, the last week in class. You'll learn more facts in college. Much more than you will in high school, and all this knowledge that you are learning will become crystallized inside of your head, and you won't forget it. It'll be in your long-term memory. Now, you might not be able to retrieve it, but it'll be in your long-term memory, and this, again, increases as you age. Raymond Cattell contributes to IQ testing with culture fair examinations, where he created with a team of uh, psychometric test writers different IQ tests that would assess people's cultures accurately with validity. Because if I speak differently than you do in my language, we're talking English, there are different variations of English. I mean, in the North, they talk very different than they do in the South or the West or the East. But if you're cultural, you might have a cultural language difference, even though you're speaking English as well, right? So, based on your own experiences within your culture, some questions could be unfair on the IQ test. So that's what a culture fair test does. It accurately assesses your intelligence, no matter which culture you come from. Howard Gardner, excuse me, is the multiple intelligence theorist, and where IQ is mostly assessing problem-solving ability, spatial skills, and mathematical and linguistic abilities. Howard Gardner believed that we have compartmentalized different areas of intelligence, not just this IQ area. So you have that in these first couple of different multiple intelligence, and there are 8 of them that you need to remember. You could be assessing each one of these 8 and be very different in all 8. So for most of them, you're probably average because that's the majority of the population. But musically, you might be gifted. Or you might be borderline intelligence in music. Or even the bottom 2% have kind of like what we would call an intellectual disability when it comes to music, right? Might be thinking that with me singing, we're going to get them cheetahs. Ooh, we got to get them cheetahs. We do got to get those cheaters. Oh. Put a star next to the area that you think you are most gifted in. All right, put a star next to the area that you are most gifted in. And then put 2 stars next to the area that you think you are least gifted in on this list. Oh, yeah. I'll tell you the purpose for why we're doing this in a minute. So 1 star next to the thing that you're most gifted in, and 2 stars next to the one that you think you are least gifted in. See, here's what the cheetah's going to do. They're going to copy you, and they're going to put those stars on there, thinking that, oh, this must be what I'm good at, okay? And maybe you'll even tell them to move their stars based on that. But then when I ask them if I think they're cheating, I say, hey, come here, you punk. I think you cheated. Come here. Why'd you put these 2 stars next to mathematical? They're going to be like, well, I'm awesome at math. Boom! Got him! Ow! Got those cheetahs. Oh, yeah. We're going to get those cheetahs. Kinesthetic, and this reviews the kinesthetic sense as well. Kinesthetic is a body, knowing your body, being intelligent with fine movements of your body, and then, of course, music. Interpersonal is knowing other people, being able to socially connect to other people and be more socially relational to other people. Intra is knowing yourself. It's within. Intra is within. And then environmental is working with the land, resources of land, animals, those types of things. So these are our different areas of intelligence. I have 2 more intelligent theorists that I want to go over here. And the next one is Charles Spearman, who is actually kind of the first theorist that we studied historically. And he came up with 2 different areas of intelligence, and that was general intelligence and then specific intelligence. And we call these G and S. General is testing your IQ knowledge. So that linguistic, spatial, mathematical ability, problem-solving ability that we talk about with IQ, that's your general intelligence that you could be measured on. Specific intelligence is any other area, and that could be hundreds of different things that you could be intelligent with. Relational skills, music, business, I don't know, whatever, kinesthetic, okay? And then it's Cattell who breaks down G intelligence into fluid and crystallized. And it's Gardner who really uses factor analysis to take all those specific intelligences and then identify them to 8 that we just went over. And remember that Gardner, just a little refresher too, Gardner studied savants to come up with those 8. He said if a savant can be extremely talented with music, but intellectually disabled in all these other areas, then that has to be a compartmentalized area of intelligence, right? Well, maybe so. Maybe he's onto something. And then we have Robert Sternberg as the last intelligence theorist. And we have the triarchic theory, three different areas of intelligence. The analytical is going to be the IQ area. Creativity is going to be a different compartment where you're able to manipulate and use the environment to design and solve problems. And then practical intelligence is your common sense or your street smarts, just being able to figure out things like that a average person should be able to do, how to use different things, etc. All right, so those are our intelligence theorists. And if you have any questions, shoot me a remind. To our final area now of this key people review, we're going to study a few therapists or theorists in therapy, and then we end with our big experimenters, and we're done. And these therapists we just went over a week ago, so I don't feel like I need to spend too much time on them because Ebbinghaus forgetting curve, it hasn't been at 30 days yet, so you should have pretty good recollection of these people here. Aaron Beck, just make sure you connect him to cognitive psychology. Ooh, look at this. A for Aaron, B for Beck, C for cognitive. Boom, great mnemonic, right? Pessimism and optimism. Remember, cognition is the way that we view the world around us, and how we view the world would directly impact the way that we behave and the way that we feel and our emotions that we have. Pessimism is someone who views the world in a negative, glass half empty, like I'm missing something in my life. Optimism is seen as that glass is half full, and focusing on what you have, focusing on the good in your life, the positive. The more pessimistic you are, the more prone you are to many of these mental illnesses that we just recently covered, specifically depression. All right. So Aaron Beck gives an analogy of wearing dark sunglasses. That if you wear these shades of darkness where you're always seeing the negative and focusing on the negative, then that's how you're going to feel on the inside. And we talk about how good things can happen to you throughout the day, and then somebody says something rude or judges you, and you focus all your attention and your self-worth on what that person is saying. Well, that's completely illogical. It's totally unhealthy, and you shouldn't be doing it. You should be focusing on the positive things. And that's why I come from, I think, where I kind of lean towards the cognitive perspective. The way that we are internalizing things really affects, of course I'm speaking with bias right now, but really affects the way that we output, the way that we treat others, and the way that we're going to behave, and the way that we feel about ourselves ultimately. Albert Ellis is the one that you're more likely to be tested on. Cognitive therapist. A for Albert, C for cognitive. So cognitive therapy, he created rational emotive therapy. Remember that almost 50% of all therapists in the United States, counselors and psychologists, come from the cognitive perspective. And they all use rational emotive therapy. And this is using rationale, which is logic, reasoning, as the motivation or the method of therapy. So if I'm feeling bad about myself, or I'm depressed for these reasons, or because I've lost someone in my life, like maybe someone has left me or broken up with me, or I'm doing really poorly in school, in that therapy session, they're going to try to change my belief system and shift, have a paradigm shift, and see it in a different way than how I'm viewing it. And these are called the ABCs. The goals of the ABCs is to get you to change your consequent emotion. It's not the event, remember, that causes us to be angry or upset. It's not that person. According to cognitive therapist, it's how we're internalizing the situation that's going on. And if you are putting your self-worth in what a person thinks about you, then naturally you are going to have the emotion of feeling low self-worth and bad about yourself. But that's illogical. It's illogical because people are wrong. It's logical when it doesn't even make sense if 5 people find value in you and 1 doesn't, that you lean and place all your worth in that one person. I mean, but cognitive psychologists are much smarter than me. They would give you much better logical reasons on why you should never even put your own self-value and worth into what somebody else thinks of you, how completely unhealthy and irrational that is. Right, that is Albert Ellis. Mary Cover Jones is a behaviorist, and she introduces, and this is early 1900s. I don't even know where that click is coming from. Sorry. She introduces us to exposure therapy. What is that? I don't even know what that is. I hope it doesn't happen again. Because I know that these noises, I've been told by my 7th period friends that these noises are extremely loud when they happen, so I'm sorry about that. Behaviorist goal in therapy is to, if the environment has caused my issue and it's causing my anxiety, then we need to reshape your experience with the environment. And so if I am terrified to, we'll just stick with our spider thing, if I'm terrified to be around spiders, you need to get me comfortable with spiders. And it's not getting inside my head and thinking about them differently. It's not going to my unconscious mind from childhood to try to figure out why I'm afraid of spiders and how I'm feeling about them. Let's just get you exposed to spiders so you start feeling comfortable with them. Be around them more. Your sympathetic nervous system, fight or flight, will be engaged, and the behaviors know that. But eventually, parasympathetic will start to bring you down. And you'll start to become more comfortable if you're spending a lot more time with the thing that you fear the most, right? If it can be done in a healthy way. Joseph Wolpe is the one who came up with, from exposure therapy, systematic desensitization. This is the one that you're most likely to see on the AP test from all the behavioral treatments. And it's used for phobias, or it's used for anxiety, where we systematically, like an algorithm, step by step, we are going to desensitize you, which is take away your sensitivity to the object of your fear. And if that's public speaking, then we can come up with this systematic approach of starting with something that makes you feel a low level of anxiety when it comes to public speaking, like maybe just thinking about public speaking. And we ratchet that up, maybe to then seeing a picture of someone public speaking. I mean, if you have this intense fear, that picture is going to raise your heart rate a little bit, get you more comfortable with that. Then we ratchet up and we watch a video of someone public speaking. And then you maybe speak just in front of me. And then we get you in front of people. But it's a systematic process. Flooding, remember, is when you do it all at once. So we just push you on the stage and make you publicly speak. Yay. I mean, you can imagine how terrifying that would be. Or we put you in a closet full of spiders all of a sudden. That's called flooding. Usually doesn't work too well and isn't that effective. But some behaviors will use it. Of course, the patient would have to agree to it. That would be horrifying, right? If not. Another behavioral therapy is called aversion therapy. Remember, if they believe in classical conditioning, that associations can be made, and this is why most of us have phobias or addictions. And aversive therapy is where you pair your addiction with some negative stimulus. So if you're addicted to alcohol, or even, I don't know, if you're addicted to your cell phone, we can pair that cell phone with something that makes you sick so you don't want to go back to your cell phone. And that's called aversion therapy. And it's specifically good to be with some substance that makes you really, really sick. So with alcohol, it makes sense. We put a little pill in your beverage that would make you horribly ill. And that's called aversion therapy. But that's, again, behavior. So that's why I'm bringing up this now, because of that. All right. And now we get to our experiment. You know what I like to eat? Do you know what I like to eat? Donuts. I love donuts. It's delicious. In the ASH experiment, also known as the conformity experiment, it could be referred to as either one. It depends on the question. If they want you to recollect that the ASH experiment was about conformity, then they're not going to put conformity in the title. But if they want you to know the details of the experiment or recall those, they could probably just call it the conformity experiment. In the conformity experiment, we just went over this in class when we went over the FRQ, so I don't feel like we have to go over this too much. Remember that they were told that it was a perceptual visual test. And then there was one subject in a room full of Confederates. The Confederates were acting as though they were subjects. They would give intentionally wrong responses to see if the person under pressure would conform with the group, knowing that they were obviously the wrong answers, like obviously incorrect. And many of them do. About 60% of them do conform and go along with the group. Now, different situations change that. The larger the group, the more pressure there is, the more likely you are to do that. If there's a dissenter, someone who goes against the group, you're less likely to conform. So kind of remember those things about conformity. And then, of course, with deception taking place in the experimentation, ethically, we have to debrief afterwards and tell that person what the experiment was on. So that was Solomon Asch. Another one that we just went over in class, we'll slow it down on the last two, but was Leon Festinger and cognitive dissonance. We just reviewed this, I think, in most of the periods where your thinking it conflicts. You know what? I don't even like what I wrote there. Let's thinking conflicts. Your two thoughts that you have. And in his experiment, remember that he told a group of kids to lie and say that a game was fun when it wasn't, to tell other kids that this game was fun when it actually wasn't. When you have conflicting thoughts, it causes tension within you. That's what dissonance means, and that's why I put that in red. The dissonance and then the tension and anxiety. Cognitive means thinking. If you can remember that, then this term should be pretty easy. So cognitive dissonance is when you have that tension. Now, as a possible outcome to remove that tension, to remove the dissonance, you can change your thought. And that's what we talked about in class, where that girl starts to believe that she actually liked the really boring game that they were playing. And that was the $1 group in that experimentation. But that's not cognitive dissonance. That's an outcome or result of cognitive dissonance. So in an FRQ, just stick to two conflicting thoughts. Cognitive dissonance has not been on an FRQ for years. And you know what? If there was one term that I had to predict is going to be on the FRQ tomorrow, I'm not going to eat a book if it's not. But if there's one term that I had to predict that would be on there that hasn't shown up in years, it would be this term. Because it'd be one of their hard terms that they would put on there because most of the country they want to understand it. It's a confusing term. And that's why I wanted to really emphasize and go over it quite a bit. It's not when you break down cognitive and dissonance. If you really understand those two words, I think the examples get pretty easy. I've given you lots of examples in class that we've gone over. And so I think cheating is a great one. So cheating is wrong and you start to cheat. Those are two conflicting thoughts that you're having. Your action is going against your thought. It causes you tension. Well, of course that would. Or I don't want to steal and I go into a store and I put something in my pocket like a little piece of candy. It causes me a little bit of tension. So what am I going to do? I might just keep the tension and just let it go away eventually. Or I might convince myself, you know what, stealing's all right. This is just one little candy. One time a long time ago, I dropped a nickel in this store. So, I don't know, you just start to, protect your ego, right? All right, that is Leon Festinger's cognitive dissonance. Two experiments we haven't talked about in a long time are Milgram and Zimbardo's experiment. And we'll start with Milgram's, the obedience experiment. And this was an experiment done in the aftermath of the Holocaust to really try to understand and see how it happens, but if a Holocaust was possible of happening here in the United States. And Stanley Milgram believed that it is, that it could happen anywhere. And it's all based on an authority figure telling you to do something. If you view someone as an authority, the majority of people will do whatever that authority figure tells them or asks them to do, no matter how horrendous it could be. So he puts them in this situation, these subjects, where they volunteer, that you get paid, but they volunteer to be a part of this experiment. So I guess they're not volunteering, they're getting paid, but they're willing participants. They go in, and randomly they're assigned to be the teacher, right? They think it's random, but it's not. And there's someone behind a wall that's getting shocked by the teacher every time that they get an incorrect answer. They're told it's a memory test, and that's the deception here. And they're told that the person's being shocked, but in reality, they're not being shocked either. No one's getting physically harmed in this experimentation. And then there's an authority figure. The authority figure, every time the person behind the wall gets the incorrect answer, the authority figure says, shock them. And then when you say, I don't want to anymore, they say, no, you have to. You have to continue shocking them. You must continue. And that's the independent variable, are the orders given by the authority. That's what's being manipulated in this experiment. And the dependent variable is whether or not the person shocks. I would like to operationally define that right now. So let's operationally define obedience. All right? That's the dependent variable. And if we were asked to operationally define the dependent variable, we have to give an explanation of how we're going to measure it. So how do we know when obedience has been done in this experiment? And this is why I wanted to go over it. It's not when the person shocks them the first time. That's not what Milgram believed obedience was in his experiment. He believed it was when they went all the way to triple X, to death. So they went all the way up that panel. Excuse me, I think there were like 30 levels on that shock panel, 20 to 30 levels. They went all the way to the end. That was obedience. And 2/3 of the subjects went all the way. And in variations of Milgram's experiment, we get the same results with different genders, different races, different age groups. They're usually right around 50 to 60% of the population is going all the way to the end and administrating shocks that would probably kill the person on the other side of the wall. And they're being manipulated to think that the person is being severely hurt. I mean, the person's screaming, yelling on the other side of the wall, "Please stop!" So it's not like they're just being silent over there by any means. All right. Excuse me. I would encourage you, if you're still kind of lost and you don't have good recollection of this experiment, or you're kind of confused with the things that I just talked about, go on YouTube and just watch the Milgram experiment. A couple minutes video long, see it, kind of absorb it in once again. If you're unclear on what this all looked like, if you got a clear memory of it, then I think you're good to go.
If you only knew the power of the dark side. When I walk on by, girls be looking like Debbie Fly. I been to the beat, walking down the street and my new the freak. Yeah, this is how I roll. Animal print pants out the truck.
Okay, I can't do that anymore. But that's Zimbardo, man, right there. Zimbardo in the flesh. The man. The one and only. Dr. Zimbardo. Stanford Prison Study. This was a study done on roles and how when you're placed in different roles, it changes your behavior. And in roles of power or authority situations, Zimbardo believed being placed in that role could cause you to do horrible, bad things. And this is the Lucifer effect. And this was discovered in a basement at Stanford University. And if you forget the details of this experiment, I would encourage you to go back and watch it as well. But basic synopsis, he has healthy boys, half of them prisoners, half of them prison guards, and turns them loose. And it gets nasty down in that basement. The things that arise in the experiment has to be shut down well before it was intended to be shut down because of what the prison guards were doing to the prisoners. And these were good boys, but because they were placed in this situation and in these roles, they were doing bad things. And this is social psychology. The heart of social psychology is that society, the people we hang out with, the experiences that we have can change us. And the Lucifer effect says every single one of you is capable in this room in the right situation or placed in the right situation of doing something bad, even myself. And as much as I know that that's true. And that's why we got to try to keep ourselves out of bad situations and keep our heads level so that we don't subscribe to great atrocities of evil.
If you only knew the power of the dark side.
Thank you for that, Darth. You're welcome, Mr. Solano. Well, our time has come here to an end. I hope you've had as much fun as I have, although you're probably slightly disturbed. Hey, I get it. I disturb myself at times. There's this old saying that the overwhelming majority of psychology teachers in high school and college have psychological issues themselves. That's why they're able to teach it, right? I mean, your criminal justice teacher can't teach it if he hasn't been in the field of criminal justice. Well, there you go. It explains things. Hey, I'm excited for Monday. I know that you're going to do great. We have covered and had this great review on the key people. You got your top 120 note cards. Keep shuffling through those. Know those well. And let's go get them. Let's go get them. Goodbye.